What happens when the myths of the Old West collide with the cold truths of the modern world? When lawmen lose their grip, outlaws rewrite the rules, and the frontier becomes a mirror of everything we'd rather ignore. From bleak deserts to broken dreams, these films redefined the Western and gave it a heart that beats in modern times. In this video, we're riding through the top 18 Golden Age neo-Western movies ever made. Let's get into it. Number 18, Rolling Thunder, 1977. Kicking off our list is Rolling Thunder, a revenge story soaked in sorrow and cold fury. This film might not look like a Western at first glance, but deep down, it's all there. The lone figure returns home from war, only to find a world he no longer recognizes. In this case, that lone figure is Major Charles Rain, a Vietnam War veteran who comes back to Texas to a hero's welcome and a personal tragedy. After enduring unspeakable suffering in a POW camp, Rane returns home with a quiet, restrained demeanor that hides a deep well of pain. But when criminals brutally invade his home, taking everything he holds dear, he doesn't turn to the law. He arms himself, grabs a shotgun, and sets off into the heart of darkness to deliver his own brand of justice. What makes Rolling Thunder a standout is how it captures the disillusionment of the post-war era. The Western frontier has been replaced by gas stations, motels, and back-alley bars. The outlaw isn't wearing a bandana anymore. He's got greasy hair, sunglasses, and a switchblade. But the code of vengeance, honor, and survival, that remains unchanged. William Devane delivers a haunting performance as Rane, a man reduced to quiet violence. Tommy Lee Jones offers a chillingly calm portrayal as his war buddy, a silent soldier ready to follow his friend into hell. The film doesn't glamorize violence. It presents it as methodical, clinical, and often tragic. Each shot fired feels like a death knell for something already broken inside. This is the kind of film that doesn't need a sweeping desert to feel like a Western. It has that stoic pacing, that slow build, and that inevitable confrontation waiting at the end of the trail. Rolling Thunder might not wear the cowboy hat, but make no mistake, it rides the same dusty path as the classics. Number 17, Straight Time, 1978. Next up, we have Straight Time, a film that takes the traditional outlaw narrative and places it firmly in the urban landscape of 1970s Los Angeles. But don't let the city backdrop fool you. This film is a Western at heart, with a drifter, a code, and a final confrontation that seals his fate. Dustin Hoffman plays Max Dembo, an ex-con who wants to go straight. He's done his time and wants a chance at a normal life. But in a world that treats him like he's guilty before he's even tried, the walls start closing in fast. Parole officers watch every move. Job prospects vanish before his eyes. And the temptation to return to his old ways is always waiting just around the corner. What makes Straight Time a powerful neo-Western is its exploration of freedom, what it means, who gets it, and what happens when it's taken away. Max isn't a hero. He's not even likable half the time, but he's driven by a need to carve out space in a world that's already decided what kind of man he is. That echoes the fate of many Western anti-heroes. Men walking the line between law and lawlessness, between right and wrong, often alone. The film is shot with a raw realism that gives every scene an uneasy edge. There's no sweeping score, no grand shootouts, just desperation, ticking clocks, and the steady drumbeat of inevitability. When Max finally snaps, it isn't loud, it's quiet, almost tragic. But once he starts riding down that road again, there's no turning back. This is a slow burn of a film, but its power lies in its restraint. It shows us a world where justice is just another word, and redemption is a moving target. Straight Time doesn't ask you to root for Max Dembo. It just asks you to understand him, and that makes it a true modern Western. Number 16, Ozanas Raid, 1972. Coming in at number 16 is Ozanas Raid, a film that takes the moral compass of the traditional Western and turns it on its head. Directed by Robert Aldrich and starring Burt Lancaster, this is a harsh, unflinching look at frontier warfare, not through the lens of legend, but through the eyes of confusion, fear, and violence. The story follows a young lieutenant leading a cavalry unit, tasked with tracking down a group of Apache warriors who have escaped from a reservation. At his side is a seasoned scout, played by Lancaster, who understands that the young officer's training and textbook knowledge mean little in the unforgiving desert. The mission becomes a brutal game of survival, strategy, and ethics, as the troop is slowly picked apart by an invisible, patient enemy. What separates Ozanas Raid from typical Western fare is its grim honesty. This isn't a story of cowboys and noble standoffs. It's a film about the dehumanizing effects of violence on both sides, about what happens when ideals clash with the raw need to survive. Every decision feels heavy. Every ambush is brutal and unromantic. The Apache warriors aren't portrayed as villains, but as people driven by desperation and rage in a world that has left them no other option. Lancaster's character stands as a bridge between two worlds. He sees the futility in trying to apply Eastern morality to a land governed by its own rules. The film constantly pits idealism against reality and lets that tension simmer until it explodes. Shot in the dry, windswept landscapes of the American Southwest, Ozanas Raid has that classic Western look, but its heart is far darker and more complex. It doesn't give you a neat ending. It doesn't promise closure. Instead, it asks whether victory even means anything when the cost is your soul. It's a film that lingers long after the credits roll, one that challenges, provokes, and reminds us that the American frontier wasn't built on glory, but on blood and hard truths. Number 15, The Missouri Breaks, 1976. At number 15, we have The Missouri Breaks, a film as strange as it is compelling. Directed by Arthur Penn and featuring two Hollywood heavyweights, Marlon Brando and Jack Nicholson, this film defies easy categorization. It's a Western, yes, but it's also a dark comedy, a meditation on violence and a character study wrapped into one. Set in the wide, rugged plains of Montana, the story follows a rustler named Tom Logan, played by Nicholson. He's part of a gang that's been stealing horses from wealthy ranchers. When one of those ranchers decides he's had enough, he hires a regulator named Lee Clayton, played by Brando, to handle the problem. What follows is a slow, eerie cat-and-mouse game between predator and prey, and a deep dive into the psychology of violence. Brando's performance as Clayton is something out of left field. He shifts accents, changes moods on a dime, and plays the role with an unsettling eccentricity that makes every scene unpredictable. Some critics found it baffling. Others called it genius. But there's no denying that it adds a layer of menace to an already tense story. Nicholson, by contrast, plays Logan with grounded realism. He's a criminal, yes, but he's smart and thoughtful. His motivations are practical. He's not looking to shoot his way through life. He just wants to survive it. The dynamic between the two men becomes the film's center of gravity, as they circle each other like two wolves in the same territory. What makes The Missouri Breaks feel like a true neo-Western is its willingness to question the old codes. The good guy and bad guy lines are blurry at best. Violence isn't a last resort. It's a tool used by men who've lost touch with anything else. And the land, vast and indifferent, offers no redemption, just silence. This is a Western that doesn't ride in a straight line. It takes detours, meanders, and plays with expectations. But like the landscape it captures, it's haunting, strange, and impossible to forget. Number 14. Outlaw Josie Wales, 1976. Sliding into number 14 is The Outlaw Josie Wales, a film that cements Clint Eastwood's place not just as an icon in front of the camera, but as a director with something to say. This is a tale of vengeance, redemption, and finding purpose in a world that has taken everything from you. The story begins in the dying days of the American Civil War. Josie Wales is a peaceful farmer until Union soldiers murder his family. With nothing left to lose, he joins a group of Confederate raiders, transforming from a man of peace into a relentless gunman. But when the war ends, Josie refuses to surrender, choosing instead to ride alone across a broken land, hunted by those who fear what he represents. What makes Josie Wales such a compelling character is his quiet strength. He doesn't talk much. He doesn't need to. His actions carry the weight of someone who has seen too much and lost too deeply. But he's not heartless. As he travels, he collects a band of misfits and outcasts, people just as broken as he is. And through them, he slowly begins to reclaim a piece of his lost humanity. The film is filled with memorable moments, from dusty standoffs to small acts of kindness. Eastwood directs with a steady hand, balancing grit with grace. There are shootouts, yes, but also silence. Long pauses. Characters who feel real, not just roles. At its core, the outlaw Josie Wales is about what comes after revenge. Once the bullets stop flying, what's left? Can a man who is killed for justice ever find peace? These are the questions the film poses, not with grand speeches, but with lingering looks and small choices. This isn't just a Western. It's a journey across a scarred America, where loyalty is rare, hope is fragile, and forgiveness is the hardest road of all. Eastwood made many Westerns in his time, but few carry the emotional weight and quiet power of Josie Wales. Number 13. Heaven's Gate, 1980. At number 13, we have Heaven's Gate, a film once known more for its troubled production than its actual story, but over time, it has emerged as one of the most visually ambitious and emotionally profound neo-westerns of the 20th century. Directed by Michael Cimino, who had just won an Oscar for The Deer Hunter, this film tells the story of the Johnson County War in late 19th century Wyoming, where wealthy landowners conspired to wipe out immigrant settlers accused of stealing livestock. It's a true story, but Cimino transforms it into something mythic and tragic, a sprawling, aching meditation on power, greed, and lost ideals. The film centers around James Averill, a Harvard-educated marshal played by Chris Christopherson, who finds himself caught between the corrupt cattle barons and the poor immigrants they want removed. What follows is a slow, sweeping tale of growing unrest and inevitable violence, with love, loyalty, and personal conviction tested at every turn. From a visual standpoint, Heaven's Gate is a masterpiece. The cinematography by Vilmos Zsigmond is painterly and poetic. Scenes are filled with wide, golden fields, crowded immigrant dances, and fog-soaked shootouts. The landscapes are vast, but the story feels intimate, always focused on the people caught in forces bigger than themselves. The film explores the erosion of American idealism. Its characters are flawed, struggling, and often overwhelmed by the cruelty around them. There are no clean resolutions, no triumphant rides into the sunset, just the lingering sense that something sacred has been lost. Upon its release, Heaven's Gate was a commercial disaster, often cited as the film that nearly ended an era of auteur-driven Hollywood. But time has been kind. Critics have reassessed it as a bold, uncompromising work that pushed the Western genre into new emotional and political territory. It is not an easy film. It demands patience. But for those willing to take the journey, Heaven's Gate offers a deeply rewarding experience, a film that dares to dream big, even as it tells a story of dreams fading into dust. Number 12, Jeremiah Johnson, 1972. Coming in at number 12 is Jeremiah Johnson, a quiet yet deeply powerful film about solitude, survival, and man's uneasy relationship with nature. Directed by Sidney Pollack and starring Robert Redford, this is a frontier tale that trades in the usual shootouts and saloons for mountains, silence, and the slow churn of seasons. The story is simple on the surface. Jeremiah Johnson, a disillusioned war veteran, turns his back on civilization and heads into the Rocky Mountains to live as a trapper. But the wild is not a place that welcomes outsiders easily. He struggles to learn the ways of the land. He makes mistakes. He nearly dies. And over time, he becomes a different man, harder, quieter, and more in tune with the world around him. The film is light on dialogue but rich in atmosphere. Every frame feels like it was painted by hand. The snow-covered peaks, the thick forests, the flicker of campfires against endless night. These elements do more storytelling than words ever could. What makes Jeremiah Johnson a quintessential neo-Western is its mood. It's not about taming the West. It's about surrendering to it. Johnson is not a hero in the traditional sense. He's a man trying to escape pain, only to find that the wild has its own kind of suffering. He forms bonds, but they are fleeting. He finds peace, but it never lasts. There is action, yes. Encounters with animals, harsh winters, and clashes with native tribes bring tension and danger. But it's the moments in between that define the film, the quiet contemplation, the way Redford's eyes tell us everything we need to know. In many ways, Jeremiah Johnson is about the loneliness of freedom, about a man who finds what he's looking for, only to realize he might never fully belong to it. It's beautiful, haunting, and as cold as the wind that howls through the pines. Number 11. The Ballad of Cable Hogue, 1970. At number 11, we have The Ballad of Cable Hogue, one of Sam Peckinpah's most overlooked gems. Known for his explosive blood-soaked westerns, Peckinpah takes a very different approach here, offering a story that is gentle, funny, and quietly heartbreaking. The film begins with betrayal. Cable Hogue, played by Jason Robards, is left to die in the desert by his greedy partners. With no water and no hope, he stumbles through the sand, clinging to life. But just when all seems lost, he finds a small spring of water, his salvation. That spring becomes the foundation for a new life, as Cable builds a rest stop for travelers along a stagecoach route. Unlike other westerns that center around lawmen or outlaws, this is a film about a man who simply wants to live in peace. He's not looking for revenge. He's not chasing gold. He just wants to survive, build something of his own, and maybe find a little happiness along the way. The charm of Cable Hogue lies in its tone. It's warm, earthy, and often quite funny. Robards plays Cable with a gruff kindness, someone who's been through hell but hasn't lost his sense of humor. The supporting cast, including Stella Stevens as a free-spirited love interest and David Warner as a wandering preacher, add color and heart to the story. But underneath the lightness is a layer of melancholy. The world is changing. The stagecoach route Cable depends on is being replaced by cars. Civilization is moving in, and there's no stopping it. Peckinpah uses this gentle story to reflect on the passing of an era, the slow death of the frontier, and the men who once thrived in it. There are no grand shootouts or dusty duels, just one man, standing against time, trying to hold on to something pure. The Ballad of Cable Hogue may not be Peckinpah's most famous film, but it might just be his most heartfelt. Number 10, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, 1973. Rounding out our first half is Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, a mournful, meditative western directed once again by Sam Peckinpah. This film brings together everything that makes the neo-western so powerful: moral ambiguity, slow-burning tension, and the sense that the Old West is slipping away. The story follows two men, Pat Garrett, now a lawman, and Billy the Kid, an outlaw. Once friends, they find themselves on opposite sides of the law. Garrett has been tasked with bringing Billy in, dead or alive. What follows is less a chase and more a slow unraveling of loyalty, history, and the choices that define us. James Coburn plays Garrett as a man weary of the world. He doesn't chase Billy with fire in his heart. He does it because the world is changing, and he either adapts or gets left behind. Chris Christopherson brings a youthful energy to Billy, a man who refuses to play by the new rules, no matter the cost. And then there's the music. Bob Dylan not only appears in the film, but also provides one of the most haunting scores in Western history. His song, "Knockin' on Heaven's Door," plays during a quiet moment of death and reflection, turning a simple scene into something unforgettable. Peckinpah's direction is slow and deliberate. He's not interested in spectacle. He's telling a story about time, about friendship turned sour, about the end of freedom. Every scene feels like a eulogy for the West and the men who once lived by its code. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid is not a tale of good versus evil. It's a story about choices, what we sacrifice for survival, and what we lose along the way. It's a film that aches with regret, and one that stays with you long after the dust has settled. Number 9, Walker, 1987. At number 9, we have one of the most radical and unconventional neo-westerns ever made, Walker. Directed by Alex Cox, this film doesn't just bend the rules of the Western, it burns them down and writes its own playbook. It's political, surreal, and unafraid to blur the line between historical truth and modern commentary. The film tells the real-life story of William Walker, an American adventurer and mercenary who, in the 1850s, declared himself president of Nicaragua. Played with icy calm by Ed Harris, Walker is a man driven by twisted ideals and blind ambition. He believes he's spreading democracy, but his methods are violent, authoritarian, and hypocritical. As he descends deeper into madness, the film pulls no punches in showing how greed and power corrupt even the most self-righteous missions. But what makes Walker truly unique is its style. Alex Cox doesn't try to hide the fact that he's making a film. He inserts modern-day items into the 19th century setting: helicopters, jeeps, lighters, and even magazines. It's jarring, yes, but it's meant to be. These anachronisms aren't mistakes, they're deliberate choices that draw parallels between past and present imperialism. Visually, the film is striking. Shot in vibrant colors with stylized production design, every frame feels like a bold, unsettling painting. The violence is graphic, the tone often darkly satirical, and the message unmistakable. This is not a feel-good story. It's a brutal indictment of history repeating itself. Despite its daring vision, Walker was not well received on release. It was too different, too confrontational. Critics didn't know what to make of it. But over time, the film has been rediscovered and praised for its audacity and relevance. In many ways, it was ahead of its time. This is not your typical Western. There are no outlaws with hearts of gold, no sweeping shots of horses riding into the sunset. Instead, Walker gives us madness wrapped in patriotism and ambition dressed as liberation. It's a film that dares to say what others won't, and for that, it earns its place on this list. Number 8. The Three Burials of Melquiades, Estrada, 2005. At number 8, we find a film that is as poetic as it is punishing. The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, directed by and starring Tommy Lee Jones, is a deeply personal neo-Western about friendship, guilt, and redemption, set along the harsh, sun-bleached borderlands of Texas and Mexico. The story follows Pete Perkins, a grizzled ranch foreman whose best friend, Melquiades, an undocumented Mexican worker, is shot and killed by a young, impulsive Border Patrol agent. When the local authorities quickly cover it up and move on, Pete takes matters into his own hands. He kidnaps the agent, exhumes his friend's body, and begins a journey across the desert to fulfill Melquiades' final wish, to be buried in his hometown in Mexico. This journey becomes far more than a physical trek. It's a path to emotional reckoning, a modern odyssey through a borderland full of division, hypocrisy, and forgotten lives. The film exposes how modern systems fail those caught in between. The law doesn't offer justice. Institutions don't offer compassion. Only personal code, loyalty, and penance can fill the void. Tommy Lee Jones delivers a masterclass in restraint as Pete. He's a man who speaks little but carries enormous emotional weight. The kidnapped agent, played by Barry Pepper, transforms from arrogance to remorse under the relentless desert sun. Their dynamic is central to the film. Two men on opposite ends of the moral spectrum, gradually forced to confront the consequences of their actions. The cinematography is breathtaking. The desert is both beautiful and cruel, a place where life is stripped to its essentials. The camera lingers on dust, sweat, and silence. Moments of violence come quickly and without glory. But the film never feels bleak. It feels human. The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada is a neo-Western that reclaims the genre's moral complexity. It doesn't shout its message. It walks it across the sand, one step at a time, until it sinks deep beneath your skin. Number 7. The Last Picture Show, 1971. Coming in at number 7 is The Last Picture Show, a film that may not feature shootouts or outlaws, but nonetheless stands as one of the most powerful neo-westerns ever made. Directed by Peter Bogdanovich, this coming-of-age tale set in a dusty Texas town during the early 1950s captures the death of the American West, not through violence, but through silence, emptiness, and time slipping away. The story centers around two teenage boys, Sonny and Dwayne, who are navigating the awkward terrain between adolescence and adulthood. They live in a town that feels half abandoned, its streets lined with cracked pavement and flickering neon lights. Their world is filled with restless longing, unspoken regrets, and the slow collapse of dreams. Though technically a drama, the film is drenched in Western atmosphere. The values of the old frontier, honor, masculinity, independence, linger in the air, but they no longer hold power. Cowboys still roam the streets, but they are aging, tired, and irrelevant. The cinema, once the heart of the town, is on its last legs. When it closes for good, something symbolic dies with it. What gives The Last Picture Show its emotional depth is the way it treats its characters. Everyone here is searching for love, for purpose, for escape. But escape is hard when your world feels like it's shrinking by the day. Cloris Leachman, Ben Johnson, and Ellen Burstyn deliver unforgettable performances that add rich texture to this aching portrait of loss. Shot in luminous black and white, the film feels like a memory, a ghost of a time already gone. Bogdanovich directs with restraint and tenderness, letting scenes play out with quiet honesty. The dialogue is minimal. The silences speak volumes. The Last Picture Show is a funeral for the American West, not with gunfire, but with quiet tears and closing doors. It's one of the most delicate films on this list, but also one of the most haunting. Number 6, Hood, 1963. At number 6, we come to Hood, a film that shattered expectations and redefined what a Western hero could be. Directed by Martin Ritt and starring Paul Newman in one of his most iconic roles, this is not a story about valor or triumph. It's a portrait of moral decay set against the backdrop of the modern West. Newman plays Hud Bannon, a fast-talking, hard-drinking rancher in Texas who seems to have it all: looks, charm, and confidence. But beneath that exterior is a man who lacks empathy, avoids responsibility, and lives only for himself. He clashes constantly with his principled father, Homer, and becomes a dangerous influence on his young nephew, Lonnie. What makes Hajid a neo-Western is the way it flips the genre's traditions. Instead of celebrating rugged individualism, it critiques it. Hud is the kind of man who would have been a hero in earlier Westerns. But here, his arrogance and selfishness are shown for what they really are: destructive and hollow. Shot in striking black and white, the film captures the vast open spaces of Texas, but they feel empty, not free. The land itself is sick, under threat from a cattle disease, and that becomes a metaphor for the moral sickness infecting Hud's worldview. His defiance of values like honesty, responsibility, and community leaves a trail of damage in its wake. Newman gives a magnetic performance. He's charismatic, but you can't trust him. He's handsome, but hollow. And by the end of the film, you're left wondering not just what happened to the West, but what kind of men we choose to admire. Hud is a film that asks hard questions without giving easy answers. It strips the Western of its glory and shows us what's left behind: a world where heroes aren't always good, and good men don't always win. It's bold, unforgiving, and unforgettable. Number 5, Lone Star, 1996. At number 5, we enter the sun-bleached terrain of South Texas for Lone Star, a slow-burning mystery that is as much about the land as it is about the people who walk it. Directed by John Sayles, this film weaves together multiple generations, cultures, and secrets into a modern-day parable of justice, identity, and reconciliation. The story follows Sheriff Sam Deeds, played with quiet resolve by Chris Cooper, who investigates a long-buried murder after a skeleton is found in the desert. As he digs into the case, he finds himself unraveling the myth of his own father, a legendary sheriff who ruled the town with an iron grip. The deeper he goes, the more he discovers how the truth is never simple, and how legacy often hides uncomfortable realities. Lone Star is not a Western in the traditional sense, but every frame breathes with its spirit. It takes place in a dusty border town, caught between past and present, where cultures collide and histories refuse to stay buried. There are no six-shooters or saloons here, but there is tension, conflict, and a quiet code of honor that runs deep through the land. What sets the film apart is its intricate storytelling. Sayles builds his world patiently, intercutting timelines and perspectives, revealing how each generation inherits both the pride and the pain of the one before. The film explores racial tension, political corruption, forbidden love, and what it means to belong, whether to a place, a family, or a name. The performances are uniformly strong, but it's the atmosphere that leaves a lasting impression. The vast Texas landscape feels open yet claustrophobic, as if the horizon itself is keeping secrets. The music is understated, the pacing deliberate, the revelations devastating in their simplicity. In Lone Star, justice isn't served with a gun. It comes through understanding, through facing hard truths, and deciding whether to carry the past or finally let it go. It's a film that lingers in the soul long after the credits roll. Number 4, The Wild Bunch, 1969. At number 4, we come to the film that kicked the door wide open for the neo-Western movement. The Wild Bunch, directed by Sam Peckinpah, is not just a film. It's a cinematic thunderclap that redefined the Western with blood, grit, and sorrow. This is the end of the trail, captured in slow motion and gun smoke. Set in 1913, As the American frontier gives way to barbed wire and railroads, the film follows a gang of aging outlaws led by Pike Bishop, played with weary authority by William Holden. Their world is vanishing fast, and they know it. One last job, one last score, this is all they have left. What makes the Wild Bunch so legendary is its raw honesty. These are not noble heroes. They are killers, thieves, and liars. But Peckinpah paints them with depth and dignity. They have a code, broken though it may be, and when it comes time to stand together, they do, knowing full well what awaits them. The film's action sequences are explosive, balletic, and brutal. The final shootout is among the most iconic in film history, not just for its violence, but for its emotional weight. It's not a celebration. It's a funeral march. The cost of loyalty, pride, and defiance is written in every bullet. Peckinpah directs with operatic intensity. The slow-motion gunfire, the dusty landscapes, the haunting musical cues, they all serve to elevate the film beyond mere entertainment. This is a lament for the Old West, and for the men who couldn't adapt to the new world rising around them. There is no happy ending here, just a few dying embers of honor in a world that has moved on. But the Wild Bunch doesn't ask for your sympathy. It demands your respect. It's messy, violent, and beautiful. A cornerstone of modern Western storytelling, and a film that still echoes with power more than 50 years later. Number 3, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, 1974. At number 3, we plunge into the heat-soaked madness of Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, another entry from the uncompromising Sam Peckinpah. If The Wild Bunch was a grand operatic tragedy, this film is its fever dream, grimy, bitter, and burning with rage. The plot is deceptively simple. A powerful Mexican landowner puts a price on the head of a man named Alfredo Garcia. Literally, he wants his head brought to him in a sack. Enter Benny, played with gritty brilliance by Warren Oates, a washed-up American piano player in a seedy bar who sees the bounty as his last chance to escape his miserable life. What follows is a descent. Benny goes on the road, and the road goes straight into the pit of human desperation. There are betrayals, blood, and broken bottles. There are sun-scorched graves and drunken monologues to a decaying severed head. But what sounds like chaos is actually heartbreak. Benny becomes a man undone, not just by the world, but by his own illusions. Peckinpah doesn't romanticize anything here. He shows us a world stripped bare. There are no cowboys or sheriffs, just survivors, all trying to get out alive or drunk enough to forget. The violence is brutal and abrupt, the humor bitter, the beauty buried under sweat and dirt. Warren Oates carries the entire film. With sunglasses, a dusty suit, and a constantly unraveling soul, he gives one of the great performances in all of Western cinema. You can see the weight of the world in his shoulders, the last flickers of hope in his hollow laugh. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo. Garcia is not for everyone. It's ugly, it's painful, but it's also true. It shows us what happens when the myth of the West dies, and only the bones remain. A dark masterpiece that cuts deep and never lets you go. Number 2, The Getaway, 1972. At number 2, we shift into high gear with The Getaway, a relentless, stylish, and gripping ride through betrayal, loyalty, and the long road to redemption. Directed by Sam Peckinpah and starring Steve McQueen and Ali MacGraw, this film fuses the Western ethos with the tight mechanics of a heist thriller, and does it with absolute cool. The story begins with McQueen's character, Doc McCoy, locked in prison after a robbery gone wrong. He's granted a release on one condition. He must do one last job for a crooked politician. That job, of course, goes south, and Doc finds himself on the run with his wife, chased by cops, criminals, and chaos at every turn. What makes The Getaway so memorable isn't just the plot, it's the pulse. This film moves with rhythm, from the dusty Texas towns to backroom deals and double crosses. Every moment feels taut and dangerous. And yet, at the center of all this action is a story about trust. Doc and his wife don't just run from enemies, they run from the doubt between them. McQueen is magnetic as always, stoic, smart, unflinching. But Ali MacGraw brings unexpected strength to her role. Together, they form a team that is equal parts passion and survival. Their chemistry is undeniable, even when tension simmers just beneath the surface. Peckinpah shoots with urgency. The chases are tight, the action raw. Bullets shatter glass like thunder. Cars spin out on dirt roads. And in between, we get quiet moments that show the real stakes: love, betrayal, and the question of whether two people can ever truly escape who they are. The Getaway is a Western stripped of horses, but not heart. The law is still corrupt, the code still personal, and the price of freedom still high. It's slick, intense, and stylish without sacrificing depth. A classic modern outlaw tale that blurs the line between honor and survival. Number 1, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948. And at number 1, we arrive at the origin point, the film that laid the foundation for every neo-Western that followed. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, directed by John Huston and starring Humphrey Bogart, is a masterpiece of greed, paranoia, and the unraveling of men in pursuit of something bigger than themselves. Set in post-revolutionary Mexico, the film follows 3 down-on-their-luck Americans who set out to strike gold in the remote Sierra Madre mountains. At first, there's camaraderie. They work together, dream big, and believe in the promise of fortune. But as the gold begins to pile up, trust begins to crack. Greed worms its way into every glance, every silence, every decision. Bogart gives one of his greatest performances as Fred C. Dobbs, a man who begins the journey with charm and ends it in madness. His descent is chilling, believable, and tragic. Walter Huston, the director's own father, plays the grizzled prospector Howard, whose wisdom can't stop the poison spreading among them. The landscapes are unforgiving. The sun is relentless. The film feels claustrophobic, even in wide open spaces. That's the genius of Huston's direction. The real threat isn't the bandits or the wilderness. It's the men themselves. There are no heroes here, no shootouts. Just suspicion, desperation, and the crumbling of friendship under the weight of temptation. It's Shakespeare in the dirt, and its influence can be felt in everything from No Country for Old Men to There Will Be Blood. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre shows us that the frontier doesn't just test a man's courage, it tests his soul, and more often than not, the soul comes up wanting. It's the ultimate neo-Western, made before the term even existed. A film that reminds us it's not the gold that corrupts, it's the man who seeks it.